Sam Garrett. The voice cut through the Arizona heat like a blade through silk. 8 mounted men, 8 rifles, all pointed at one weathered cabin where a man hadn't expected to care about living. Until today. Sam stepped onto the porch, boots creaking against old wood. Behind him, through the window, Isabella Santiago watched with those dark eyes that had already seen too much. In her hands, a Colt revolver. Loaded. Ready. "You want her?" Sam called out, his voice carrying 15 years of buried rage. "You'll have to come through me first." The leader, Joaquin Mendoza, smiled like a rattlesnake in Sunday clothes. "1 man against 8, amigo. Those are poor odds." Sam's hand hovered over his holster, the same hand that had failed to save Elena 15 years ago in Tennessee, the same hand that wouldn't fail her sister today. "I've had worse," he said. The desert wind held its breath. 8 fingers tightened on 8 triggers. But could one man's guilt be enough to stop a small army? And what price would love demand in the Arizona dust? If you're feeling that tension building, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from folks who understand what it means to fight for something worth keeping. 3 days earlier, Sam Garrett had been a dead man walking. 15 years of guilt and whiskey had carved lines into his face deeper than the Arizona canyons. His cabin sat like a tombstone on the ridge, silent, forgotten, exactly how he preferred it. Then she came stumbling out of the pine line. Isabella Santiago moved like smoke-given form, her torn white dress clinging to curves that spoke of Spanish nobility and Irish fire. Blood stained the fabric. Dirt streaked her olive skin. But those eyes. Christ, those eyes. Sam's breath caught in his throat. He'd seen those same dark depths before, in a field hospital in Tennessee, looking up at him from a dying face. "Elena," he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. The woman, this ghost, this impossibility, lifted her chin. "My sister," she said, voice cracked but steady. "She spoke of you before." The words hung in the desert air. Before she died. Before Sam's world had ended the first time. Isabella collapsed then, her knees hitting the dust with a soft thud. The white dress rode up her thighs as she fell, revealing skin marked with rope burns and worse. Sam caught her before she hit the ground, and the scent of her, jasmine beneath the blood and fear, made him remember what it felt like to be human. "Please," she breathed against his chest, "don't let them take me back." Sam lifted her effortlessly, feeling the way her body trembled against his. She was all dangerous curves and desperate trust, this woman who carried his dead love's eyes. As he carried her toward the cabin, her head fell against his shoulder, and for the first time in 15 years, Sam Garrett felt his heart remember how to beat. Inside, by lamplight, the full horror revealed itself. Her back bore the marks of systematic torture, burns, cuts, and something that made Sam's blood turn to ice. A black dragon tattoo wrapped around symbols that meant only one thing. "Serpiente negra," Isabella susurró, viendo su reconocimiento. "The Black Snake Operation. They mark their property." Property. The word hit Sam like a physical blow. This woman with her fierce beauty and Elena's eyes, reduced to property by animals who wore human faces. "You're safe now," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Isabella turned to face him then, and the movement made her torn dress slip from one shoulder. The exposed skin glowed golden in the firelight, marred by bruises that told stories Sam never wanted to hear. But beneath the damage, he could see the woman she was, proud, beautiful, unbroken, despite everything they'd done Am I? She asked, and there was challenge in her voice. Or am I just trading one cage for another? Sam met her gaze steadily. I'm not them. Prove it, she said, and let the dress slip a little further. It would have been so easy. She was offering herself, this broken angel, testing him the only way she knew how. Her body was a weapon they'd taught her to use, and she was offering it now to ensure her survival. Sam turned away, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Get some rest, he said, his voice rougher than sandpaper. Nobody's going to hurt you here. When he looked back, Isabella was smiling, the first real smile she'd managed since arriving. It transformed her face, chasing away the shadows and revealing the woman Elena's letters had described. Her brave, beautiful little sister who dreamed of seeing the world. Thank you, she said simply. That night, Sam sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, listening to her soft breathing through the thin cabin walls. Somewhere in the darkness, coyotes called to each other across the desert, but it was the sound of Isabella's voice whispering his name in her sleep that kept him awake until dawn. The next morning brought coffee and careful conversations. Isabella moved around the cabin like she belonged there, her graceful movements a stark contrast to the violence written across her skin. She'd found one of Sam's old shirts, and it hung loose on her frame, revealing glimpses of collarbone and the elegant line of her throat. Tell me about Elena, she said, settling across from him at the rough-hewn table. Sam's hand stilled on his coffee cup. For 15 years, no one had spoken that name aloud in his presence. She was everything good I ever had, he said finally. And I let her die. The fever took her, Isabella said gently. Not you. She told me, in her letters, how you held her, how you never left her side. I should have been faster getting help. Should have been God. Isabella's eyes flashed. Men love to carry the weight of the world, don't they? As if taking blame makes you powerful, instead of just foolish. The rebuke hit harder because it came wrapped in Elena's cadence, her way of cutting through his self-pity with surgical precision. You're like her, Sam said. No. Isabella leaned forward, and the borrowed shirt gaped slightly, revealing the curve of her throat, the shadow between her breasts. Elena was good. Pure. I am something else entirely. There was invitation in her voice, dark and complex. She was testing him again, but differently this time. Not survival, something deeper. Something that made the air between them thick as summer honey. What are you then? Sam asked, his voice dropping lower than he intended. Isabella stood and walked to the window, her movements deliberate, hypnotic. The morning light caught the edges of her silhouette through the thin fabric, outlining every curve, every hollow. When she turned back, her eyes held a heat that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. I'm the woman who's going to save us both, she said. Before Sam could respond, the thunder of hoofbeats echoed from the ridge road. Isabella's face went white, all that dangerous confidence evaporating like morning dew. They found me, she whispered. Sam was already moving, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. But as he reached for his gun belt, Isabella's hand caught his wrist. Her touch burned like a brand. If they take me, she said, promise me you won't come after me. Don't throw your life away like Elena. Don't. Sam's voice cut her off with surgical precision. Don't you dare compare this to that. He pulled her against him then, feeling the soft press of her body through the thin shirt. She fit against him perfectly, as if she'd been made for this moment. Her breath whispered across his collarbone, and he could feel her heart racing against his chest. "I won't lose you," he said into her hair. "Not you too." Isabella pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. Then, with movements slow as pouring honey, she reached up and traced the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from Gettysburg that Elena used to kiss. "Then we fight," she said simply. The rider who appeared was exactly what Sam expected: expensive clothes, hiding a cheap soul. The man sat his horse like he owned the world, his eyes calculating as they took in the cabin, Sam, and most especially Isabella. "Buenos dias, señorita," the man called out in accented English. "You've caused quite a stir, running away like that." Isabella stepped partially behind Sam, but her chin remained high. "I'm not running anymore, Diego." "Ah, but you are mistaken. You belong to El Jefe. And El Jefe, he wants his property returned." Sam's hand found the butt of his Colt. "The lady says she's not going anywhere." The rider, Diego, laughed, the sound oily as snakeskin. "Lady? This puta? You have no idea what she is, gringo. What she's done." "I know what you did to her," Sam said, his voice deadly quiet. Diego's smile faltered slightly. 3 days, viejo. 3 days to say your goodbyes. Then we come back. All of us." As quickly as he'd come, Diego wheeled his horse and disappeared back into the pine line. Isabella sank to her knees then, all the strength bleeding out of her like water from a broken dam. Sam knelt beside her, gathering her trembling form against his chest. "He's right. You know," she whispered. "You don't know what I am. What they made me do." Sam tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I know you're Elena's sister. I know you're brave. And I know I'd rather die than let them take you back." "Sam," she breathed, and there was something in the way she said his name that made him think of salvation and damnation all wrapped up together. 2 days passed, like the calm before a tornado. Sam cleaned his weapons with the methodical precision of a man preparing for war. Isabella watched him, her presence both comfort and torment. She'd taken to wearing his spare clothes, denim that hugged her hips, cotton shirts that strained across her chest when she moved. Every gesture seemed designed to test his resolve, but Sam was beginning to understand it wasn't seduction she was after. It was trust. "You keep looking at me like I'm Elena," she said on the second evening, settling beside him on the porch steps. "You have her eyes," Sam admitted, "but not her heart." Isabella's voice carried weight older than her years. Elena never killed anyone. The confession hung between them like smoke. Sam didn't ask for details, didn't need them. He'd seen enough war to recognize a fellow soldier. "Sometimes killing is the only choice left," he said finally. Isabella leaned against his shoulder, and he could feel the warmth of her through the thin fabric. "Is that what you tell yourself about Tennessee? About not saving her?" "I tell myself a lot of things," Sam said. "Most of them lies." "Then tell me the truth." Sam was quiet for so long that Isabella had almost given up expecting an answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried 15 years of buried pain. "I loved her more than my own life, and when the fever took her, I wanted to follow. Spent years trying to drink myself into the grave. Then you showed up, carrying her eyes, and suddenly—" He stopped, the words too raw to finish. "Suddenly, you wanted to live again," Isabella finished softly. "Yeah." She turned to face him then, her movement making her shirt pull taut across her chest. In the dying light, she looked like a painting of temptation, all golden skin and dangerous curves. But it was her eyes that held him, those dark depths that promised salvation or damnation, depending on what a man brought to them. Sam, she whispered, and her hand found his cheek, thumb tracing the old scar. He caught her wrist, not pulling away, but not letting her closer either. Isabella. I know, she said. I know you're trying to be honorable, but tomorrow, they come. And tonight, I don't want to be alone with ghosts. The kiss, when it came, tasted of whiskey and desperate hope. Isabella pressed against him with an urgency that spoke of borrowed time and stolen moments. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Sam felt 15 years of carefully built walls crumble to dust. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. This doesn't change anything, Sam said, though they both knew it was a lie. It changes everything, Isabella corrected, her voice husky with want and something deeper. Because now you know what you're fighting for. That night, Sam lay awake, listening to her breathe in the next room. Every soft sound she made seemed designed to drive him to distraction. When she whispered his name in her sleep, it was all he could do not to go to her. Instead, he spent the dark hours checking and rechecking his ammunition, cleaning weapons that were already spotless, preparing for a fight he knew he might not survive. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the sound of multiple horses and the jingle of spurs. Sam counted 8 riders as they spread out in a rough semicircle around the cabin. Your time is up, gringo. The voice belonged to Diego, but the man beside him was clearly the real power. El Jefe himself, a Mexican dandy with dead eyes and hands soft as a woman's. Sam stepped onto the porch, Isabella close behind him. She'd braided her hair back and traded his spare clothes for her torn dress, now cleaned and mended. She looked like a warrior queen preparing for battle. The woman stays with me, Sam called out. El Jefe laughed, the sound carrying no humor. You think to steal from Joaquin Mendoza? From El Jefe himself? That woman has cost me much money, gringo. She will pay, and so will you. Then come collect, Sam said, and his hand dropped to his gun. The world slowed to honey. 8 hands reaching for 8 weapons. The soft click of a hammer being drawn back. Isabella's whispered prayer in Spanish. And then, cutting through the tension like a blade, another voice. I wouldn't, if I were you. Marshal Diego Reyes stepped from the tree line, badge catching the morning sun, rifle trained on El Jefe's chest. Behind him came 6 more lawmen, all armed, all ready. This is federal jurisdiction now, Reyes announced, and you are all under arrest. The gunfight that followed was brief but brutal. El Jefe's men, caught between Sam's practiced aim and the marshal's superior numbers, fell quickly. Only Joaquin Mendoza himself managed to escape, spurring his horse into the pine line, with curses trailing behind him like smoke. But it was what happened after the dust settled that mattered most. Isabella knelt beside one of the wounded men, not to help, but to retrieve something from his vest pocket. A small leather journal filled with names, dates, locations, evidence of the entire Serpiente Negra operation. This ends it, she said, holding the book up to the light. All of it. Marshal Reyes whistled low. That little book's going to put a lot of bad men in federal prison, and set a lot of good people free, Isabella added. Sam watched her in that moment. This woman who'd been marked as property, who'd endured hell itself, now holding the key to dismantling the empire that had tried to destroy her. She stood tall in her mended dress, hair gleaming in the Arizona sun, beautiful and terrible as justice itself. What happens now? Sam asked. Isabella turned to him, and for the first time since he'd known her, uncertainty flickered in those dark eyes. I don't know. I've never been free before. Not really. Sam stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, to catch the scent of jasmine that seemed to follow her everywhere. Then maybe it's time you learned. And you? She asked. What will you do when I'm gone? The question hit him harder than he'd expected. For 15 years he'd been content to exist on the margins of life, nursing his guilt and whiskey in equal measure. But Isabella had changed that. She'd made him remember what it felt like to have something worth protecting. I was thinking, he said carefully, that maybe you wouldn't have to go anywhere, if you didn't want to. Isabella's smile could have lit up the entire territory. Are you asking me to stay, Sam Garrett? I'm asking you to build something with me, something real, something Elena would have been proud of. Isabella reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the old scar with infinite gentleness. She told me once, in her letters, that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone whose damage fits with yours. And? Sam asked, though he already knew the answer from the way she was looking at him. And I think our damage fits just fine. The kiss they shared then tasted of promises and new beginnings. When they broke apart, the Arizona sun was painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the future stretched out before them like an open road. 6 months later, visitors to the Garrett Ranch would find a thriving operation, cattle grazing in green pastures, a house filled with laughter and the scent of Isabella's cooking. They'd see Sam teaching his wife to shoot, though she was already a better marksman than most men, and Isabella teaching him to read Spanish from books she ordered from Mexico City. What they wouldn't see were the nights when old nightmares visited, when past trauma cast shadows across present happiness. Those were private battles, fought in whispered conversations and gentle touches, won through patience and a love stronger than fear. Isabella kept the small scar on her shoulder where the dragon tattoo had been burned away. To remember, she'd tell Sam when he traced it with his fingers, to remember that even the darkest marks, it can be overcome. And Sam kept Elena's last letter in his desk drawer, not as a shrine to the past, but as a bridge to the future. Because Isabella had been right. Love wasn't about finding perfection. It was about finding someone whose broken pieces fit with yours, to make something stronger than either could be alone. The desert wind still sang through the Arizona hills, but now it carried different stories. Stories of redemption and second chances. Stories of two damaged souls who found in each other not just love, but the courage to heal. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change everything. Stories like this remind us that it's never too late for a second chance. Never too late to choose love over fear. If this one touched something in you, hit that subscribe button, because everyone deserves to hear tales of hope rising from the ashes, especially when the world feels too dark to navigate alone.